After everything that had happened, the story quietly shifted. We return once again to a different life of middle schooler Sung Jin Woo in another world. Here, the long-awaited continuation of Jin Woo's high school life was beginning. There was the touching reunion with Gina, new friendships blooming that weren't possible in his previous life, and the eternal battles of the Shadow Army. Even a gentle, unfolding romantic story, like the embroidery that finished off the tapestry of his new beginning. All of this was waiting for him. But despite everything seemingly perfect, Jin Woo carried inside him a strange, heavy feeling, a sense of loss, as if he had forgotten something immensely important. He tried to shake it off. He thought deeply about it, but no matter how much he searched his heart, he couldn't remember what he had lost. The more these thoughts came to him, the heavier and more restless his heart grew. One afternoon, he sat in a small, cozy cafe, watching the city life through the window. The man who was pouring him coffee noticed his gloomy expression and asked, "Hey kid, what's troubling you so much?" Jin Woo smiled weakly, covering up the uneasiness inside him. "It's nothing. I've just been busy with work lately, no time for sadness." He needed to move forward. That's what he told himself. Later, as they went upstairs, they noticed something odd. A man was being led by two officers down the corridor, his whole body shaking violently. There was pure terror in his eyes. Detective Guile and a young investigator watched curiously. Who were these men they were arresting? One of them was muttering, "Monsters, shadows, they're chasing me." The shadow came out of the ground. It told me I'd regret living if I don't surrender in 24 hours. Suddenly, the prisoner screamed at the detectives, "It's your fault! Send me to jail! Please, before it comes for me." Guile was puzzled. "Monsters? Shadows? What's this all about?" he asked one of his colleagues. Apparently, several unrelated criminals had started hallucinating, seeing terrifying monsters hunting them. Soon after, Guile was called to the conference room. Inside, several researchers and senior detectives sat around debating. One researcher scoffed, "Are we seriously thinking about releasing these criminals just because they're hallucinating monsters?" Another calmly replied, "We don't want to release them. We want to see what happens after 24 hours. Guile objected, "Maybe they're just on something, hallucinating from drugs or new side effects." But another investigator spoke up. "The drug test came back negative. We even double-checked with the National Forensic Service." Even with the evidence, Guile didn't know what to believe. It made no sense. Why were criminals, with no connection to each other, all saying the same thing? One of the senior men suggested, "Let's recreate the conditions. Put one criminal somewhere isolated, monitor him, see if anything shows up after 24 hours. Another joked, "What's the worst that could happen? A bunch of brave detectives will be there." They laughed nervously. No one really thought monsters would appear. They needed a volunteer. The senior detective looked at Guile. "You don't have to do this if you're uncomfortable." But Guile stood firm. "I'll do it." That evening, they took a trembling prisoner to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The prisoner begged, "Please, don't leave me here. I'll die, I swear it." The detectives reassured him, "Relax. We're here. Nothing's going to happen." But even the air felt different, heavier, colder, unnatural. Time passed. The night dragged on. The prisoner sat frozen in fear, whimpering to himself. One detective checked his watch. "How much longer?" Detective Kim replied, "About 10 minutes left." Guile noticed it too, the feeling growing stronger. The air was wrong, almost vibrating. They tried to joke around to shake off the creeping unease. Another detective asked the prisoner, "Hey, you sure you're not on anything?" But the prisoner just kept whispering, "They're coming, they're coming." Then, suddenly, the shadows moved. Before Guile could even react, a shadow burst out from under the ground. It struck two detectives with terrifying force, sending them crashing into the warehouse gates. They collapsed unconscious. The prisoner began to sob hysterically, and from the darkness, 3 monstrous ants emerged, towering, horrifying, twisted in black mist. Guile couldn't believe what he was seeing. Three shadow ants, just like the prisoner had said. And before anyone could do anything, the ants pounced on the prisoner. They tore him apart, ripping his body into pieces with horrifying ease. Guile stood frozen in horror. His legs shook uncontrollably. His mouth went dry. He wanted to run, but he couldn't move. And then one of the ants turned towards him, and it smirked. Not a monstrous snarl, not a hungry gaze, a knowing, almost playful smile, as if they recognized him, as if they had met him before. In their eyes, Guile glimpsed a memory from a life he couldn't remember living, an echo from a time long forgotten. He didn't understand yet, but he would soon. This was only the beginning. Not long after the chaotic warehouse incident, the head of the department stormed into the police station, his face thunderous with rage. He roared at the assembled detectives, "You idiots! You let a criminal, a man who turned himself in, disappear without a trace? And you all got yourselves knocked out cold?" No one dared raise their heads. Then the chief fixed his glare on investigator Guile, his voice cutting like a whip. "You, did you call the ambulance? Do you remember anything?" Guile swallowed hard and answered honestly, I only remember coming to. Everyone else was already lying unconscious. The chief ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He lowered his voice but made his command clear. Listen up. Nothing happened. Got it? You were all investigating a gang of thugs. They hurt themselves during a crime. That's the story. Not a single word about monsters or shadows. Understood? The detectives nodded silently. The truth would be buried. Later that day, Guile sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer. His mind was spinning. A junior investigator cautiously approached. Sir, why are you still poking around that case? Didn't the chief tell us to drop it? Guile glanced at him, then back at his screen. I'm just curious. The timing feels off. Crime rates spiked around late February to early March, and a lot of criminals turned themselves in too. The junior investigator scratched his head. It's weird. Come to think of it, my aunt runs a small book rental store. She said business drops in February-March every year. New school year and all. Guile suddenly straightened up. Remember that, just in case. Something about all this felt connected. The next morning, students gathered in front of the middle school, buzzing with excitement. Inside the staff room, the principal handed a student file to a stern teacher, nicknamed Viper for his brutal discipline. The principal tapped the file. We're admitting a problematic student. The Viper skimmed it. Father, fireman, mother, housewife, grades, above average. Doesn't seem like a problem child, he muttered. The principal smirked. Read the next paragraph. The Viper's eyes widened slightly. This student had disappeared from home for 2 years during elementary school. The principal looked him squarely in the eye. Think you can handle him? The Viper grinned. That's why they call me the Viper. Leave him to me. Out in the school courtyard, the new students lined up under the morning sun. The Viper marched back and forth, his wooden stick tapping the ground. Quiet! Attention! Then he spotted him. Jin Wu. Different from the others. Calm. Silent. The Viper narrowed his eyes. He stormed toward him. Hey, you! Why are you wearing gloves, huh? But then Jinwoo turned around and looked at him. For a moment, the Viper froze. He felt a terrifying, suffocating pressure he couldn't explain. It was as if an enormous predator was looking through him. Cold sweat broke down his back. Without another word, he whirled around and yelled at the other students instead. Stand still! Shut up! Anything to get away from that boy. He couldn't even comprehend what had just happened. Inside a classroom, Jinwoo quietly sat by the window reading a book. A shy boy approached him. Hey, are you Jin Wu? Jinwoo lifted his eyes. The boy smiled nervously. I thought so. We were in first grade together. I live nearby now. But before he could say more, he was shoved aside. 4 bigger students surrounded Jinwoo, smirking mockingly. One jeered, What's with the glove? You think you're some kind of badass? Another sneered, Maybe he thinks he's got some cursed dragon sealed inside him. They laughed, taunting him. Jinwoo stayed silent. They pushed further. Take off the glove, freak! One reached for it, but just before he could grab it, a low growl echoed. In the invisible world nearby, a berserker shadow soldier snarled, My king, shall I tear them apart? Jinwoo calmly answered, I forbid it. Slowly, he peeled off the glove. The bullies stared, horrified. His left hand, twisted, blackened, corrupted beyond healing. The permanent scar from the Dragon King's final blow. They staggered backward, faces pale. Todd, this was just a joke, man. You can put it back on. They fled like rats. One shadow soldier growled, ready to chase them, but Jinwoo calmly said, Let them be. Peace is better. And then, with a tiny flick of his finger, he used a subtle power, making the bullies trip and fall over each other as they ran. Jinwoo sat back down, a faint smile on his lips. In this life, he wouldn't crush others with fear. He would protect what mattered, without losing himself. The real battle was no longer with monsters. It was with the darkness inside himself. Jinwoo chuckled softly as he watched the group of bullies trip and fall over themselves. He turned to his loyal commander and said with a playful smirk, It was just a little joke, nothing more. With that, he calmly ended the lesson and left the classroom. Later, as Jinwoo was walking down the hallway, the boy who had first approached him, the one from his elementary school days, caught up to him. The boy looked at him curiously. You've really changed in these 3 years, huh? You didn't even flinch when those guys tried to mess with you. You must have been practicing a lot, right? Jinwoo gave a slight nod. Yeah, I've been practicing a lot. The boy's eyes lit up. Then why don't you join an athletic club? Actually, there's one I'm thinking of joining too. Not long after, they made their way to the school stadium. There, the captain of the athletics club stood, watching the new arrivals with mild interest. He asked bluntly, So you two want to join? Jinwoo quickly clarified, No, only me. The club members standing nearby sneered. A first year wanting to join their club? Unheard of. Laughable. The captain, raising an eyebrow, asked, Are you aiming for a sports university? Did you do any running in middle school? Jinwoo shook his head calmly. No, I haven't. The senior students laughed under their breath. One of them muttered, What's he thinking? Only serious athletes are here. Guys who placed in real competitions. But Jin Wu didn't flinch. He simply said, "There's someone I want to meet. She's on the middle school track team, already competing in regional events. I want to see her at the competitions." The club captain blinked. There was a strange determination in Jin Wu's eyes. He sighed and said, "Fine, but you have to pass a test." He pointed toward a boy who was lightly jogging on the treadmill. "See him? He's the slowest runner among the second years. Beat him in a sprint and you're in." Jin Wu glanced at the boy, thin but wiry, his legs powerful, confidence radiating from his movements. "That's a lie," Jin Wu thought to himself. "This kid isn't the worst. He's probably one of the best." Still, without hesitation, Jin Wu answered, "I'll give it a try." A few club members whispered among themselves, "This guy's crazy. He doesn't even recognize the third-place finisher from regionals." The captain grinned. "One more thing. If you lose, you'll do the team's laundry and cleaning for a month." Jin Wu simply nodded. "Deal." Meanwhile, inside the teacher's lounge, Viper, the stern homeroom teacher, was talking with a female colleague. She asked kindly, "Feeling better, Mr. Viper?" Lighting a cigarette, he replied gruffly, "Yeah, I'm fine now," going out for a smoke. As he exhaled smoke, his eyes wandered to the stadium outside. And there, he saw him, Jin Wu, running laps around the track. The teacher beside him commented, "That's the new kid, right? Jin Wu, he's trying out for the athletics club. Been at it for a while, that's already his 20th lap." Viper frowned slightly. Maybe I judged him too harshly. He decided maybe he should let go of his prejudice. Maybe he was just an ordinary, hard-working kid. But when he lifted his gaze again, his blood ran cold. Through the glass, he saw it, a terrifying dark shadow moving behind Jin Wu. And suddenly, a monstrous shadow ant pressed its face right against the window, screeching with a grotesque grin. Viper screamed in terror and collapsed onto the floor, his cigarette falling from his fingers. The other teachers rushed to him, confused. "What's wrong?" Outside, in the stadium, Igris sighed at the shadow ant. "See? I told you not to scare the humans." That evening at a small restaurant, Investigator Guile and his junior colleague sat eating. The junior leaned in. "Sir, what did you really see that day at the warehouse?" Guile froze, chopsticks midair. He didn't want to remember, but he couldn't deny it either. Quietly, he muttered, I saw something like giant ants. Monsters." The younger man blinked. "Giant ants?" Just then, an elderly man at a nearby table overheard and leaned toward them. "You're not wrong, son. There were monsters once. Monster ants. Bodies like humans, heads like ants." The table fell silent. The next day, back at school, the students were sprinting full force across the stadium. Their goal wasn't just regionals anymore. The team captain, running alongside them, shouted, "We're not aiming for regionals. We're going to conquer the whole country." One of the students gasped, "Isn't that a little ambitious?" But the captain only grinned wider. "You're thinking too small." At the front of the group, leading them effortlessly, was Jin Wu, calm, determined, unstoppable. As Jin Wu continued to run, he glanced behind him. The boy who had been struggling was now sprinting with surprising speed. Without realizing it, Jin Wu had lightly used his strength, boosting the boy's stamina. The students watching from behind were amazed. "Hey, look at that rookie, he's on fire! We can't lose to him." Motivated by his fighting spirit, they pushed themselves harder. Meanwhile, up in the school building, the Viper teacher watched the stadium through the window. His face twisted into a frown. He couldn't shake off an old memory of the night at the restaurant, talking drunkenly about monster ants with two investigators. He had laughed it off at the time, pretending he was drunk and talking nonsense. But now, seeing Jin Wu, that dark, heavy presence surrounding him, it chilled him to the bone. Nearby, in the shade of a tree, Jin Wu leaned casually, watching the teacher out of the corner of his eye. Beside him, Baran, his loyal shadow commander, whispered, "Wouldn't it be easier to erase that man's memories, my king? Perhaps even remove his abilities?" Jin Wu shook his head slightly. "Number, let's observe a little longer." At that moment, hidden nearby, a group of investigators from the association was discreetly watching the school. They had begun to suspect that there was some strange link between the criminals who had seen monsters in this school. One of them muttered, "That teacher. He seems to be the only one who can sense something off about that kid." But the problem was, how could they even approach Jin Wu? "Hey kid, do you know anything about shadow monsters or ants that walk like humans?" They would sound insane. One of the investigators suddenly looked down and spotted something, a dark, creeping shadow moving unnaturally across the ground. His heart skipped a beat. Meanwhile, Jin Wu sat lazily at the back of his classroom, twirling a pen between his fingers. He smirked to himself. He noticed, as expected of the former president of the Hunter Association, Jin Chul. Even if decades have passed, even if his beast eyes remain dormant. Soon after, an investigator entered the classroom. Pretending to visit on casual business, he whispered to the teacher, "I just need a few minutes." A quick chat with a student, Jin Wu. The teacher called for Jin Wu. As he rose from his desk, a few classmates slapped him on the back jokingly, teasing him as if he was getting into trouble. Outside the classroom, the investigator smiled politely. "Sorry to pull you out like this." Jin Wu gazed at him, nostalgia and sadness flashing deep in his eyes. It had been so long. Decades, if he counted the time spent wandering between dimensions. He was happy to see Jin Chul alive and well, but if he spoke openly now, the man would think him crazy. The investigator studied him carefully. There's something about this kid. No middle schooler should have that kind of presence. He pulled out a small notebook, flipping to a page showing a roughly sketched ant. He asked gently, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" Jin Wu smiled inwardly. "He's better at drawing than I thought." He answered smoothly, "Looks like something from a fantasy series." The investigator pressed a little more. "You sure you don't know what they are?" "Monsters like these." But realizing he was pushing too hard, he quickly apologized. "Sorry, I've been working on this case too long. Sometimes I get carried away." He awkwardly offered, "You can keep the drawing if you want." Jin Wu chuckled at the reaction. "No thanks. Might cause problems if you leave it behind." The investigator smiled weakly, pocketing the notebook. The meeting ended there. As Jin Chul left, Igris rose silently from Jin Wu's shadow and asked, "My king, why not tell him the truth?" Jin Wu answered quietly, "Because forgetting is also a mercy." Even if it was the result of artificial divine intervention, some things were better left buried. Back inside the classroom, the students crowded around Jin Wu, bombarding him with questions. What happened? Why did the detective come looking for you? Jin Wu brushed it off lightly. He's just an acquaintance. Stopped by to say hi. The girl's eyes sparkled. Wow, you have a detective friend? And we saw you running yesterday. You're amazing. But the moment was ruined when a rough student shoved through the crowd, pushing a girl aside. He sneered at Jin Wu. "Look at you, all popular now, even getting detectives to visit. You think you're special?" He jabbed his dirty finger close to Jin Wu's face. "Think you're better than the rest of us? You want to take this outside, huh?" Jin Wu calmly stared at him. A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. "Should I remind him gently or teach him properly?" But before he could decide, someone suddenly grabbed him by the neck. Jin Wu was suddenly pulled aside by a group of boys. It turned out to be the guys from the track and field team. They explained quickly that they had come to warn him about something. Then they took him to meet with their captain. In the club room, Jin Wu stood up from his desk and asked, "Why all this urgency?" The boys grinned. "We're throwing a welcome party for the freshmen, and we wanted you to come." Jin Wu agreed easily. The athletics captain suggested, "Let's meet after school. We'll go for a run together." After school, Jin Wu, the track team members, and his friend gathered in the courtyard. They all headed down the street together. As they walked, the captain leaned in, asking, "By the way, what happened to those idiots who were harassing you in class? If you want, we can rough them up a little." But Jin Wu shook his head. "It's fine. I don't want any trouble before the competitions." The captain laughed and let it go. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out, Jin Wu." It was the investigator, waiting by the corner. The track team teased him, saying, "We'll hold your friend hostage. Make sure you show up at the party." Laughing, they walked away, leaving Jin Wu alone with the investigator. In a quiet park nearby, the investigator spoke urgently. "I won't take much of your time, but it's important. Your friend's life might be at stake." Jin Wu listened silently. The investigator continued. "At first I thought it was silly, but when you touched that sketch, that drawing of the ant monster, you left a mark on history without even realizing it." He sighed. "It's little things like that that change everything. I think you're the one we were looking for." As the investigator turned to leave, he thought he heard whispers. "President of the association. Can we trust him?" Confused, he spun back around, but Jin Wu had vanished. Suddenly, the investigator's memories rushed back. He remembered the gates, the monarchs, the shadow army, hunters, and in all those tangled memories, the name Jin Wu appeared again and again. It was impossible, yet the truth was undeniable. He recalled how, once long ago, he had asked Jin Wu, "Are you going to fight them alone?" And Jin Wu had nodded, because the memories of a supreme being cannot be erased by time. Still standing in the park, the investigator finally asked, "How long? Have you been fighting them?" Jin Wu answered calmly, "According to Earth's calendar, I've been gone for about 2 years. But between dimensions, I fought them for 27 years. The investigator staggered back in shock. 27 years? He asked quietly. Do you regret it? Jin Wu smiled. Not for a second. Even if given 1,000 chances, I would choose the same path every time. Curious, the investigator asked, so, what are you doing now? Jin Wu chuckled, living peacefully, enjoying life. He added, my body doesn't age anymore. I've gained divine immortality. But I decided to live as a normal man. The investigator half joked, Maybe you should join the national police. Lately, criminals have been surrendering left and right, crying about shadow monsters chasing them. Jin Wu laughed. If I joined, there wouldn't be any criminals left. The investigator grinned. As they parted ways, the investigator called, "I'll be waiting for your answer." Sun Jinwoo waved without turning. "You better not. Too much work, too little pay." Meanwhile, elsewhere, late April, a lone tourist traveling through the desert made a panicked 911 call. The emergency operator answered, "911, what's your emergency?" The man stammered, "Not exactly an emergency, but something's wrong." Confused, the girl asked, "Sir, can you explain?" He hesitated. "The building I'm on, it's about to collapse. Cracks everywhere, but that's not the worst part." The girl frowned. "The building's collapsing." The tourist shook his head frantically. "No, not the building. The sky. The sky itself is cracking." At that same time, in an apartment where Sun Jinwoo was having dinner, his shadow commander reported, "My lord, something unusual is happening." Jinwoo paused, his instincts on high alert. Later that evening, the ruler himself appeared before the Shadow Lord. They exchanged glances. Jinwoo didn't waste time. "Is this your doing? The sky falling apart?" The ruler shook his head gravely. "No, this is not us. You know it too. This way of crossing dimensions is different from ours." After sensing the strange phenomenon of the cracking sky, Sun Jinwoo immediately asked the ruler, "Do you have any idea who they are?" The ruler answered grimly, "They are outsiders. Creatures that, not long ago, tried to invade our world too. Back then, the Heavenly Army defeated them, but it seems they've decided to try their luck here, on Earth." Sun Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. "Outsiders? Why would they come to Earth now?" The ruler explained, "They are a race of giants called the Terrace of the Titans. They devour the natural rocks and minerals of living planets. Even among other monstrous races, they stand out for their cruelty and savage nature. They are not coming here as friends, they are coming to destroy and consume." Still, Sun Jinwoo was curious. But why didn't they appear before? Why are they only showing up now, even after I used the Goblet of Rebirth to reset time? The ruler grew serious. "That's the point. Their previous invasion attempt, the one we defeated, happened in another timeline. Now, due to the crossing of realities, they've sensed your presence. They're coming because of you, the current Shadow Lord of Earth." In other words, the Titans were drawn to Earth, hunting the overwhelming power of the Shadow Lord. Sun Jinwoo clenched his fist. "Even if they start building a tunnel to reach Earth, it'll take them years. By then, it'll be over. I'll stop them before they even get here." Meanwhile, far away in the western deserts of the United States, the American military had surrounded the area near the growing rift. They deployed tanks, heavy machinery, and elite experts. Scientists buzzed around, offering theories, but no one could explain the cracks in the sky. The soldiers stood ready, confident that if anything came through, their heavy weaponry would stop it. But suddenly, tanks began to rise into the air. One by one, trucks and tanks floated upward, lifted by an invisible force. Sun Jinwoo stood nearby, his power casually holding them in midair. He knew that no human weapons would work against what was coming, and the battlefield needed to be cleared. As tanks and trucks crashed back to the ground, soldiers stumbled, terrified. The commanding officer looked around in horror, and then saw it. A huge gate had opened in the sky, and from it monstrous giants began to descend. They were terrifying creatures of stone and muscle, and standing alone before them was one man. The creatures paused, confused, wondering why only a single human faced them. But Sun Jinwoo knew he was not alone. Suddenly, a colossal shadow spread across the ground, swallowing the desert landscape. And from that darkness, his shadow army appeared. Thousands upon thousands of shadow soldiers, commanders, commanders-in-chief, and 3 massive shadow dragons stood ready for battle, their loyalty unwavering. At Sun Jinwoo's silent command, the war began. Meanwhile, at the White House, the President of the United States sat tensely in his office. News had reached him. A rift had opened in the sky. Creatures were emerging. He wondered if they could even handle it, or if public chaos could somehow be avoided. He called for an emergency meeting. In the conference room, officials showed him live drone footage. At the center of the battlefield, facing off against nightmarish monsters, stood a single young Asian boy. The president pointed, "Who is he? Where are our troops? Why is a civilian out there?" But Harrison, adjusting his glasses, replied, "We don't know. We're trying to find out." On screen, the stone giants clashed against shadow soldiers. The footage was horrifying. Creatures of unimaginable size and strength battled an army made from darkness itself. And leading the fight, moving faster and hitting harder than anything else, was Sun Jinwoo. The battle raged. Sun Jinwoo raced across the battlefield at blinding speed, his twin blades flashing. Each swing decapitated stone giants, shattering them into dust. The ant army surged forward, tearing down any monster that fell. Then Jin Wu summoned something even greater, dark blades. Manifestations of pure shadow energy rained down from the sky, piercing through stone bodies like paper. He directed them towards the leader of the invaders, a titan even larger than the rest. But the leader was fast. He blocked the dark blades with heavy stone arms. The titan leader sneered, "With such a small, fragile body? You think you can defeat me?" But Jin Wu only smiled. He leapt high into the air, gathering a massive ball of dark energy in his right hand. The energy grew and intensified, forming an enormous black blade. Then, with a roar, he smashed it down onto the Titan's head. The impact was devastating, sending the Titan leader crashing into the ground. As soon as the smoke cleared, the Titan leader looked at Jinwoo and smirked. "So, even on this tiny planet hidden at the edge of the universe, there are warriors worth noticing," he said mockingly. "But your methods, growing larger to boost strength, are so primitive. Real warriors, true titans like me, shrink when it's time to fight, concentrating all power into one point. If you beg for forgiveness now, maybe I'll show you some mercy." But before he could say anything more, Baran, Jinwoo's loyal commander-in-chief, stepped forward without a word. With one clean swing of his enormous sword, he sliced off the Titan's massive stone head. The body toppled with a deep, echoing crash. Baran turned toward Jinwoo and asked, almost casually, "My lord, were you planning to have a conversation with him?" Jinwoo shook his head. "No," he said coolly. "These guys are a little too full of themselves. Let's make sure they understand their place." Baran grinned and bowed. "Leave the rest to me, my lord. I'll wipe out the others in no time." Meanwhile, back at the White House, the U.S. president sat in a tense conference room, watching the surveillance footage captured by drones and military robots. The room was silent. The president turned and asked, "Has anyone figured out who that young man is?" Silence. He stared at the screen again, at the lone figure effortlessly cutting down monsters like they were nothing. "It's like a scene out of a science fiction movie," he muttered. "And yet it's happening for real. Is there any way we can even confirm who he is?" That's when David Brandon, the director of the CIA, spoke up. "Honestly, sir, I don't even know if what we're seeing is real. But if we're willing to accept unrealistic methods?" The president frowned. "What are you getting at?" David continued. "There's someone who can help. Someone who has insight beyond normal means. Mrs. Norma Selner?" The president nodded grimly. Selner had warned them before. Maybe she could again. The next day, at the National Collegiate Athletics Championships, Jinwoo stood quietly near the track, watching as athletes warmed up. Suddenly, he heard a name called Kim Chu. Hearing it sparked a memory. Iron. It was Iron, one of Jinwoo's former shadow soldiers, a loyal commander he'd once summoned in the dungeon. Jinwoo glanced over and saw a boy warming up. He could feel it, the same aura, the same spirit. Nearby, some students were gossiping. "Wow, the captain even let a freshman compete. I heard Coach Wan's injured. Guess standards dropped." They laughed, but Jinwoo wasn't paying attention to them. He could feel it. This boy Kim Chu was different. He didn't even realize why, but the moment their eyes met, Kim Chu froze, his body instinctively wanting to kneel. He shook it off angrily and stomped toward Jinwoo. "What's with that look?" he snapped. "If you've got something to say, let's step aside." His friends chuckled, sensing a fight brewing even before the race began. Some of Jinwoo's teammates quickly stepped between them, whispering, "Hey, don't kill him before the competition." The captain laughed nervously. "Come on, Jinwoo. Save the poor guy's pride. Let's keep it clean today." Jinwoo smiled slightly and backed off. "Don't worry, nothing's gonna happen." They moved around a corner. As soon as they were alone, Kim Chu grabbed Jinwoo by the collar and growled, "Just because you wear the same uniform doesn't make you my equal." At that very second, in the shadows behind Jinwoo, his shadow soldiers, Igris, Baran, and others, erupted with joy. They recognized him immediately. It was Iron, their comrade. "My lord," Baran whispered eagerly, "allow me to discipline this lost lamb properly." But Jinwoo shook his head. There was no need. Suddenly, tears welled up in Kim Chu's eyes. Without understanding why, he dropped to his knees, trembling. Why is this happening to me?" he whispered. Jinwoo stood silently. This was no longer the Iron he once commanded. Now, he was just a boy, a human, living a new life. It wasn't Jinwoo's place to interfere. In that moment, Kim Chu, or Iron, felt something completely new, love and longing. A bond to Jinwoo he couldn't explain. Jinwoo sighed and gently snapped his fingers. With that, he tweaked Kim Chu's memories, making him forget this brief awakening. Before walking away, Jinwoo smiled and said, "You were once a great warrior. Be proud of who you are now." Meanwhile, as the middle school preliminaries were about to begin, Far away, someone ominous was approaching the home of Mrs. Selner. When Mrs. Selner opened the door, she was pleasantly surprised to see David standing outside. She smiled warmly and invited him in. As they stepped into the house, David immediately caught the scent of something delicious. He hesitated, feeling like he might be interrupting her lunch, but Selner reassured him with a smile. "Actually, I already have another guest," she said calmly. "But it's all right. Tell me what brought you here." David figured he should get straight to the point. They sat at the table, and before he could even ask, Selner spoke. "Yes to your first question, no to the second." David blinked, confused. "Wait, how do you know what I was going to ask? You can't see the future anymore, right?" Selner gently placed a steaming cup of tea in front of him and explained, "You're looking for answers from the past, aren't you? I can't see the future anymore since the god of death arrived. But I can still see the past. I know who you're curious about, but I'm afraid I can't give you detailed information about him." David frowned. He pressed again, asking if that man could be a threat to their country. Selner simply smiled and shook her head. "Did you not see that video?" she asked. "He stood alone against monsters and giants without backing down. His power was terrifying, yes, but it saved humanity. And believe me, this isn't the first time something like this has happened." David was silent, starting to understand. Selner continued, "There have been moments in history when humanity stood at the brink of extinction, and someone like him saved us, even if people never knew it." Finally, as David got up to leave, he asked her one last time, "Are you sure he's not a danger to us?" Selner smiled warmly. "I'm sure. That man is humanity's savior, not its threat." David nodded and turned to leave. As he walked toward the door, Selner called after him, "I baked some cookies. Would you like to try one?" David chuckled, declining politely. Just as he stepped outside, someone else appeared. Thomas Andre, the former S-rank hunter. Towering and intimidating as always. Thomas watched David leave, scoffing. "I don't like that old man. Maybe I should teach him a lesson." Selner hurried to scold him. "Thomas, do you want to lose your athlete's license again for causing trouble?" Thomas smirked and let it go. Instead, he asked, "Why do accidents kill so many people, Selner? Car accidents, disasters, yet somehow, because of you, I survived." "Why me?" Selner smiled softly. "Because you did a lot of good in your past life." Thomas blinked, not fully understanding. Selner went on, "You were once called the lightning rod of the UFC, a fighter who drew danger to himself to protect others." Thomas smiled awkwardly and reached for a cookie, muttering, "Hard to tell if you're joking or if you're dead serious." He nibbled the cookie thoughtfully and wondered, what is that mysterious hero doing now? Selner simply smiled, offering no real answer, because even she didn't know. Maybe somewhere he was just enjoying his youth. Meanwhile, the middle school athletic preliminaries were about to begin. All participants had gathered at the starting area. Excitement buzzed through the air. The girls' race was first. At the sound of the starting gun, they took off sprinting with everything they had. One girl, Cha Hai-in, a former elite hunter in her past life, surged ahead with incredible speed. It didn't take long, she crossed the finish line first. Breathing heavily, she sat on a bench near the entrance, pulling off her right sock. Her foot was bruised and swollen. She had managed to push through the preliminaries, but she wasn't sure she could survive another race. Frustrated, she clenched her teeth. Suddenly, a voice called out, "Trying to hide that injury?" Startled, Cha turned and saw an unfamiliar boy approaching. He looked like an athlete, maybe a high schooler. It was Jinwoo. Before she could speak, Jinwoo continued, "If you ignore that injury and run again, you'll end up spending a year in rehabilitation. You'll never run the same way again. You'll regret it forever." Cha was stunned. How could he know that? And strangely, there was something comforting about his presence, a faint, familiar warmth. As she sat there confused, the pain flared up again, and Jinwoo crouched beside her. "Hang in there for a second," he said. Before she could react, his hand began to glow faintly. A warm energy wrapped around her injury, and almost instantly the pain and the injury disappeared. Cha gasped. Jinwoo smiled gently. "You only get one chance. Next time, run without regrets." Cha stared at him in amazement. "Have we met before?" she asked hesitantly. Jinwoo chuckled. "If you can outrun me, I'll answer your questions." Cha blinked, confused. "Aren't you a high school student? I saw you race. You won every heat you entered." Jinwoo grinned. "Maybe, maybe not. Let's see if you can catch me first." At that moment, the call came. "Preliminaries are starting! All athletes to the track." Cha stood up, feeling stronger than ever, and strangely excited. She had no idea who he was yet, but something told her. This was only the beginning. After the race, Cha Hai-in grinned brightly and teased, "Maybe you'll tell me the truth after I beat you." Jinwoo smiled back, feeling a little amused. Even though she was still young and inexperienced, her sincerity hadn't changed at all, just like it had been back then. The preliminary championship was over and they parted ways, each returning to their own business. Life went on for Jinwoo, filled with small, new experiences, playing games with friends, studying for exams, and even meeting Cha again a few days later. It was the evening of the 15th. and Jinwoo was walking down the street, supposed to be studying for his Korean exams. Even though he had already passed the National Unified Exam, life didn't feel boring. He strolled leisurely, stylishly dressed. Suddenly, in a shop window, he spotted a coat that caught his eye. With a tiny, almost playful flick of magic, he borrowed the coat, running a quick spell over it, and slipped it on. Just as he was admiring it, he sensed someone behind him. Before he even turned, he heard a voice. "Wow, do you have eyes in the back of your head?" It was Cha Hyen again, grinning mischievously as she snuck up behind him. She asked if he had passed the exam. When he nodded, she clapped her hands happily and congratulated him, then asked curiously if he planned to go to university. Jinwoo answered casually. When he told her his choice, she looked surprised. "Why there? You scored so high you could have gone anywhere." He smiled and explained, "They offered me a full scholarship, and there's someone I want to meet there." Cha squinted suspiciously. "Wait, that person isn't a woman, is it?" Jinwoo chuckled but didn't answer directly. "Who knows? Maybe she is." Cha puffed up in annoyance, then demanded, "You remember our deal, right? You said if I beat you, you'd answer all my questions." Before he could reply, Cha pointed toward the towering Christmas tree ahead. "Race me to that tree. If I win, you have to answer everything." Jinwoo shrugged, amused. He couldn't refuse her. Cha quickly removed her scarf and tossed it to him. "If you like me," she said with a cheeky grin, "stay right here." Before Jinwoo could process what was happening, she took off running toward the Christmas tree. Behind him, hidden in the shadows, his shadow soldiers grumbled, "Our lord, lost? Unbelievable!" But Jinwoo didn't care. He just stood there, watching her run, his heart full. As he watched her disappear among the sparkling lights, memories flooded back. Of the dungeon where she had once saved her friend, of the time they flew together on a shadow dragon, of nights they spent under the stars, of the promises they made. He realized something. This wasn't just anyone. This was her, the woman he had always been waiting for. Cha reached the Christmas tree, turned around and shouted with delight, "I win!" Jinwoo smiled faintly. He ordered his shadow soldiers to avert their eyes, then walked toward her, his steps slow and steady. When he reached her, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Meanwhile, in the domain of eternal rest, life was just as lively as ever. Fang, one of the dragon soldiers, greeted his fellow shadows cheerfully. "Good morning, everyone." Although technically in the world of shadows, there was no day or night. Soon, Marshal Baru approached him, holding something in his hand. It was a robe, an exact replica of the hoodie Jinwoo often wore. Baru handed it over proudly. "Here, you said you wanted to be like our lord, right?" Fang's eyes lit up as he slipped it on. He almost teared up with happiness. "Maybe," he joked, "we should make this robe mandatory for everyone." Baru laughed. Then Fang noticed the small orb floating beside him. Baru suggested, "Maybe turn that into a staff. It'll look cooler." Fang agreed immediately. They called over the best artisan in the domain, a skilled shadow craftsman who had mastered the arts with wood from the sacred trees gifted by Jinwoo himself. In this vast, infinite land, over 10 million shadow soldiers lived and trained, all mentally connected to their lord. As Jinwoo grew stronger, so did they. They began to adopt more human emotions, joy, curiosity, even mischievousness. The once cold, silent world of shadows was now filled with lively chatter, playful arguments, and endless gratitude toward their master. Finally, Fang's new staff was complete, a sleek, magnificent piece of craftsmanship. As Fang admired his new gear, he noticed a group of massive shadow soldiers approaching. They introduced themselves. "We're new recruits sent by Commander Baran." Fang grinned. Among the recruits, he even spotted a few mage-type soldiers. He decided to gather them all and proudly tell them the story of the first battle against the terrifying enemy they once called the Dragon Emperor. While Fang was passionately recounting the victories they had achieved during battles across the dimensional space, his storytelling was suddenly interrupted by Commander-in-Chief Igris. Igris appeared, his usual calm face serious. "It's about to begin," he said quietly. He reminded Fang that all the shadow soldiers had once pledged. When the time came, they would stand behind their lord with everything they had. The two looked into inner space where they saw an incredible sight. Jinwoo was finally about to meet Cha Hyen again. The soldiers who had been loyal for so long were thrilled for their lord, the man who had endured so much to reach this moment. But as Igris watched Hyen, his thoughts drifted back to the very first time he had met Jinwoo. It had been in an unusual place, a hidden dimensional space created by Jinwoo's own latent power, a dungeon unlike any other. Back then, Igris had been assigned a single mission: to test the man who might become his master's vessel, his master's final hope. Although the assignment seemed simple, Igris knew deep down that this test might mark the end of his era, that once Jinwoo succeeded, he would lose his original lord forever. Still, he carried out his orders without hesitation. There was no room for doubt or sentiment. After his own powers were sealed away, Igris found himself stationed alone in that strange dungeon, waiting for the arrival of the Chosen One. At the time, Igris wasn't a shadow soldier as we know today. He had been different, not unlimited in power. The dungeon was designed to be a mirror of that ancient feeling, recreated perfectly by the architect, using the lingering will and energy of the former Shadow Monarch. The architect had planned every detail carefully. The body of the Chosen One would have to constantly evolve, breaking and healing, to withstand the power of a lord. Igris remembered sitting on his throne, sensing the presence of a young, weak human approaching the heavy dungeon doors. Is he really the one? Igris wondered at the time. Suddenly self-conscious, he realized, wasn't it arrogant of him to sit on the throne? The seat meant for the lord. While judging the one his master had chosen, he immediately stood up and hid behind a column, choosing instead to observe silently. As soon as the door opened and the torches flared to life, Igris saw him, the young man who would one day change everything, Jin Wu. At first glance, Igris wasn't impressed. If anything, he doubted, and so the battle began. It was a massacre at first. Jin Wu couldn't fight properly. He had no sword skills, no great strength. He was only desperately dodging and surviving. Igris remembered thinking grimly, he's not worthy. I'll end this quickly and spare him further pain. But no matter how many times he struck him down, Jin Wu got up again, and again, and again. He fought tooth and nail, not with skill, but with an indomitable spirit that refused to die. Finally, as Igris raised his blade to end it, Jin Wu, battered, broken, bleeding, blocked it. Not through strength, not through training, but through sheer willpower. For a fleeting moment, Igris saw in Jin Wu's gaze the same light he had once seen in his master's eyes. It stunned him. Maybe this human is truly worthy. Though Jin Wu was undeniably weak at that time, the persistence he showed shook Igris to the core. He wasn't supposed to win. He was never supposed to win. And yet, Jin Wu passed the test. Igris wasn't upset that he lost. He was relieved. Relieved that his beloved master had chosen the right successor. In the battles that followed, Jin Wu grew stronger. He earned Igris' loyalty, respect, and eventually deep affection, not just as a commander, but as a true friend and brother in arms. The Legion of Shadows grew as well. New comrades joined, including Baran, the former Monarch of Thunder, and old friends from across the dimensions returned to his side. Fang, Baran, Igris, they all stood proudly under Jin Wu's flag. Igris chuckled, remembering the little mischief they caused once. Baran had suggested putting a huge black flag on top of Jin Wu's castle. They had actually done it. When Jin Wu saw it, he was furious. He punished them all. But the punishment was lighthearted, and soon after they were back to fighting side by side. Victory after victory, they crushed the monarchs. Even after the Bowl of Reincarnation reversed time, even after the world reset, and for 30 long years they fought together without pause. Every enemy fell before them. Only the Legion of Destruction remained. One day, a monster from the Legion whispered to Igris, "I was once a shadow soldier too, but now I obey a monarch who was never human." Hearing that, Igris briefly questioned himself. Had Aichi, but when he thought about Jin Wu, about the kindness, strength, and hope Jin Wu had given them, he realized no, he hadn't betrayed anyone. He had simply found a true purpose, and he would serve his lord until the very end. After so much time with his new lord, Igris realized something deep. He had completely forgotten about his previous master. He wondered, at what point had he started to forget? When did his heart shift entirely to Jin Wu? He remembered asking Jin Wu once, "Why didn't you tell me?" Jin Wu had only smiled gently and said, "The ability to forget is a blessing given to humans by God, even if it's just the result of one of God's tools." Hearing those words, Igris understood. He no longer blamed himself. There was no need to dwell on the past anymore. The blessing of forgetting wasn't a curse, it was a gift that allowed them to move forward. Just like him, Greed and Iron had also forgotten their old memories. The timelines had twisted and merged. The past no longer mattered. What mattered was the present, and the bond they now shared with their true lord, Jin Wu. Igris knew who he was now. He was Jin Wu's swordmaster, the wing that would lead the Shadow Legion into the future. He would always stand at his lord's side. Even when it came to simple things like helping Jin Wu prepare for his school exams, Igris had proudly offered his help. After all, as a top graduate from the Night Academy, he knew he could assist, even if it meant staking his life to answer a simple exam question. Although he had been disappointed when he got the second practice question wrong. Still, he promised himself to study harder for his lord. For Igris, every battle fought under Jin Wu's banner was another chapter in his glorious, ongoing life. Meanwhile, far from the happy bustle of the Shadow Realm, a quiet, emotional story unfolded. Jin Wu's father. When the gates first appeared on Earth, his father had tried to clear one of the dungeons, But he hadn't made it out in time. He became trapped, lost between dimensions. While he wandered that rift, the rulers, the heavenly beings, found him. Seeing his determination and strength, they entrusted him with their power, the power to help stop the monarchs. The brightest shard of light even gave him a special mission: protect the Shadow Lord. And so Jinwoo's father helped from the shadows, supporting his son in ways no one could see. But he could never reveal himself directly, not until now. When time was reset after the war, Jinwoo, still just a boy again, woke up and saw his father's face. Tears poured down Jinwoo's cheeks. For a moment, he thought it was just another cruel dream. He had lost his father once before, but it was real. His father looked at him, his face full of emotion, and smiled warmly. But to hide the tears in his own eyes, he quickly raised a newspaper in front of his face, pretending to read. He didn't want his family to see him cry. Later that day, he met with one of the rulers at a small cafe. He asked quietly, "What choice did my son make?" The ruler smiled and answered, "The Lord of Shadows chose to stay in this world. He treasures every second he spends here." The Great Wars were over. The rulers had ended their interference with Earth. Humanity could finally move forward in peace. But Jinwoo's father had one last request: "Can you erase my memories?" The ruler was surprised but agreed. Still, he asked, "Why? You could keep them and watch him grow with pride." Jinwoo's father shook his head. "It would be too painful. My son would notice if I acted differently. I just want to be a normal father again, worrying about my son like any ordinary dad would." The ruler understood. After the meeting, once he stepped out of the cafe, Jinwoo's father would forget the other timeline, forget the wars, the monarchs, the rulers. But he would remember Jinwoo, not as a shadow monarch, not as a savior, just as his beloved son. And somewhere deep inside, even without memories, he would still be proud. Meanwhile, back at the track and field club party, everyone was having fun, except for one very nervous guy, Jinho. Sitting stiffly at the table, Jinho couldn't even eat properly. It was his first welcome party, and even though he was the second son of a wealthy family, this casual pork and ice cream place felt oddly unfamiliar to him. A guy from the club came over teasing, "Hey, relax. You're acting like we're about to eat you." He laughed and clapped Jinho on the back, telling him to calm down. After all, most of the seniors were nice guys. Only the Scarecrow, a strict senior, was a little scary. Still, no one here could compare to Jinho's stern father back home, so he wasn't too worried. Suddenly, as they talked, Jinwoo appeared. Jinwoo casually sat down at Jinho's table, causing the guy next to Jinho to flee to another table full of girls, leaving the two of them alone. Jinwoo poured Jinho a drink without a word. Jinho hesitated for only a second, then downed the shot, even though he knew he couldn't really hold his liquor. Jinwoo poured him another drink immediately, smiling slyly. "Today we drink together," he said. Jinho blinked, confused. Something about this situation felt oddly familiar, like he had lived through this exact scene before. The next day, Jinwoo was walking down a busy street. He pulled out his phone and called Jinho. "Hey, I have something important to do today. Really important." Something big was about to happen, and Jinwoo needed his friends by his side for whatever came next. Jinwoo had something important he had to do. He called Jinho and said, "You have to attend the last lecture for me." Jinho immediately started yelling over the phone. "Are you crazy? Everyone in the faculty knows you. How am I supposed to replace you? And where even are you right now?" Jinwoo calmly replied, "I'm at the university hospital. I'm doing practice." Jinho, even more frustrated, shouted, "What do you mean? The hospital has nothing to do with our field." But Jinwoo just laughed softly, said, "I believe in you," and hung up without giving Jinho a chance to argue more. At the same time, nearby a girl was walking, Cha Hai-in. She was lost in thought, wondering if she should enroll at Seoul University. It was a prestigious school, but she wasn't confident because of her Busan accent. Plus, there was so much English mixed into the lectures, even in the medical courses. As she was walking deep in thought, she bumped into someone. It was Jinwoo. Surprised, she quickly apologized. "I'm sorry." Without thinking, she blurted out, "Could we meet again sometime?" Jinwoo turned his head slightly, looked at her, and simply said, "No." Then he walked away. Cha stood there, frozen, her face burning with embarrassment. What was I thinking? She thought, feeling stupid for randomly asking a stranger something so out of the blue. She worried maybe he thought she was weird, or that she had some strange motive. Meanwhile, at the hospital where Jinwoo had gone, a doctor was checking on a patient, a powerful chairman. As the doctor walked in, he noticed a small, strange vial on the table. He frowned and asked, "Chairman, what is this?" The chairman smiled faintly and replied, "A young man came to visit me earlier. He left this behind." The doctor was confused. How could anyone have gotten in here? The room is under constant guard. The chairman gave a soft chuckle. He appeared like a shadow. No one even noticed him coming or going. The doctor became even more skeptical. And what did he say about this vial? The chairman's smile grew more nostalgic. He said it's a token of gratitude. He told me that in another timeline, a timeline that's already disappeared, I helped him once. The doctor tried to dismiss it as nonsense. He warned, "You really shouldn't trust something like that, Chairman." But the chairman only looked tired. He asked softly, "Doctor, if I don't drink it, how long do I have left?" The doctor couldn't answer. The chairman gave a weak laugh and said, "If anything happens, please write on my gravestone. Here lies a man who fought till the end and rests peacefully now." Without hesitation, he uncorked the vial and drank the contents. He gently set the empty vial back on the table, lay back in bed, and whispered, "I think I'll rest for a while." The doctor nodded and quietly left the room. Alone in the hospital room, the chairman stared out the window at the clouds. Suddenly, a brilliant light began to pour through the windows, soft and warm. He closed his eyes and a strange feeling washed over him. All at once, his frail, sick body started to heal. The pain disappeared. The weakness faded away. His illnesses, the ones that had plagued him for so long, were simply gone.